Why are drugs bad? In American society, so much of the culture is focused on drug use. School districts and individual cities spend millions of dollars educating their students about the dangers of drugs. Hundreds of thousands of people are arrested each year for drug use and drug-related crimes. Why does this happen? How does this happen? This trend can easily be attributed to the deaths that drugs are known to cause, and the underground nature of the drug trade. However, those ideas are not new. Drugs have been part of religions and cultures for thousands of years. Until the 20th century, drugs were used widely for recreation and medicine. What I will argue, and what has been proven over the last 100 years, is that the government created the stigma against drugs because of racial bias, and has since instituted laws that disproportionately affect minorities, especially African Americans and Hispanics. The drugs I will be discussing in my presentation are currently illegal drugs such as marijuana, cocaine, crack, and heroin. These drugs, as we know them, have been an integral part of American society for hundreds of years, predating the United States itself. From the time that colonies in America were established, starting from Jamestown in 1609, marijuana was vital for the economy of the United States. The marijuana plant was used for making hemp, which provided a much-needed source for the colonists of clothing and paper. In fact, in 1619, according to PBS.org, all farmers in the region were required by law to grow hemp. Along with growing marijuana as a crop, it was also used recreationally, as were heroin and cocaine. Heroin and cocaine were also prescribed by doctors for medical use. In fact, up until 1930, every glass of Coca-Cola had 9 milligrams of cocaine. This all changed at the beginning of the 20th century. In Mexico, recreational marijuana use was much more popular than in America at that time. In the early 1900s, Mexican immigrants began moving to the United States, and brought with them their tradition of using marijuana recreationally. There was no conflict over this issue at the beginning, but then the Great Depression hit, and millions of Americans of all races lost their jobs. However, minority workers such as African Americans and Hispanics were more willing to be paid less and replaced whites in menial jobs, making them the scapegoat for white unemployment during the time. This led to a prejudice against Hispanics and African Americans, and with this prejudice came attacks on Hispanic and African American culture, starting with recreational marijuana use. Whites spread propaganda and fabricated studies and films about how drugs were linked to violence. This led to lobbying of the government, and the government banned the use of recreational drugs. Politics and racism started the ban against drugs. Science and society have made huge changes since the 1930s. It has become clear that drugs, like heroin and cocaine, are extremely dangerous because of their hallucinogenic and addictive nature. Yet people continue to use these drugs. In the 1970s, President Richard Nixon declared a war on drugs that continued into the administration of Ronald Reagan. During this time, laws called mandatory minimums were instated. These laws give mandatory sentencing for certain amounts of specific drugs. For instance, according to Families Against Mandatory Minimums, possessing 28 grams of crack for a first-time offender has a minimum sentence of 10 years. The problem with these laws is that when examined closely, they are outrightly racist. According to drugpolicy.org, African Americans and Hispanics make up 61% of inmates nationwide in state prisons for drug-related abuses, despite making up only 27% of the overall population of the United States. Combined with the fact that numerous studies have shown that African Americans and Hispanics are no more likely to use drugs than whites, it becomes apparent that there are problems in the judicial and correctional systems. One insight into the inequality of the incarceration rate is how specific drugs affect specific races. Marijuana has been shown to be equal among all the races. However, it has been shown that African Americans are more likely to use crack, while whites are more likely to use drugs like cocaine or heroin. As shown in the federal mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines, it takes 1/3 of the amount of crack to get the same mandatory sentence as it does for heroin, and requires 1/17 of the amount of crack to achieve the same sentence for possessing cocaine. These laws are simply racist, aimed at incarcerating African Americans who are more vulnerable to those drugs because of their environment, not because they are inherently more likely to use drugs. The basis of the American judicial system is like any other. If you commit a crime, you go to jail. The problem specifically associated with the types of drug discussed here is that these crimes are considered felonies, even when the possession or selling of drugs is not accompanied by violent charges, such as killing or conspiracy to kill. Felony convictions are incredibly serious. According to the ABA Journal, felons face over 50,000 laws that prevent them from receiving public services. Felons cannot get public housing, they cannot receive food stamps, and they cannot even vote in some states, and face various other obstacles. They must tell prospective employers that they have a felony charge, which becomes a problem because of the stigma that being a felon has. These laws are so extensive that 5.8 million people are prevented from voting, up to 10% of African Americans in some states. The laws preventing felons from leading their lives make it difficult to find a job and cut off their financial safety net, leading to more criminal activity. In fact, 52% of all felons return to prison for arrests having to do with violating their parole or additional felony arrests. This keeps a large amount of the African American population convicted with felonies because of simple drug use. It creates a cycle of prison and crippling poverty because of a mistake made during adolescence. The government is maintaining racist sentencing laws and felony laws that are racist and impede on the natural rights of people to prosper freely. I'll sum up my 3 points again. Racism created the stigma against drugs. Laws have been instituted that adversely affect minorities, and felony laws keep non-violent criminals in a lower class for their entire lives. Thank you.